You've tuned in to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, episode 145. But before we go into today's episode, Rory and I have made this short prologue because I guess the state of the world as we find ourselves right now is different.
Yes, absolutely. Who would have known that in where we find ourselves in this part of the 21st century, a pandemic is kind of amongst us, and it's changing the way we live our lives, and it's certainly changing the way that counselling is being delivered. One thing's for certain, mental health and poor mental health isn't going to go away. In fact, I suspect it may increase in these difficult times. And counsellors, we need to be more adaptive to how we deliver counselling in this new situation.
Indeed. And from Counselling Tutor, we make a pledge, and our pledge is that we will gather as much factual information as we can that relates to students of counselling, practicing counsellors, specifically here in the United Kingdom, because that's where we are based, so it's easiest for us to get that information, and we will make it available. We'll make it available ongoing through our podcast, through our website at counsellingtutor.com, and through our Facebook group, which is Counselling Tutor. Go on Facebook, you will find us there. And we'd just like to say, there's been so many questions. I'm going to start with from students of what happens with courses that have been closed down. Can you study in isolation? And the guidance we have so far is contact your learning institutions, contact your awarding bodies. We certainly have spoken to CPCAB because they are a partner with us on the podcast, and they have issued guidance on their website. And I've got the website address for you here, and that is cpcab.co.uk. And from their homepage, there is a section on COVID-19 update. You can click on that, and they've got some frequently asked questions. And of course, Rory, you've suggested that we mention as well the World Health Organization. This is just for general data and factual information on COVID-19 right across the world, whatever country you find yourself in. And the website that you want to be looking at then there is WHO, that's WHO.INT for international. So it's WHO.INT, and you can select your country from there.
Yeah, it's really important at times like this that as professionals, we look at authority sites. There's a lot of misinformation, a lot of false news out there. We need to look for authority sites. And if you join our Facebook page, we will be sending fact-checked and fact-based information out to help qualified practitioners, and I guess those general interested members of the public who follow our podcast and maybe in our Facebook page, to be able to see accurate information, because it's times like this that we really need clarity.
So we acknowledge what is going on in the world now. We acknowledge maybe struggles that you might be facing. We acknowledge struggles that your clients may be facing. And we pledge to do our best to bring you, as we've both said, the most up-to-date factual information through our Facebook page via our podcast. But for today, we had already made episode 145 for you because we make them in advance. So let's leave that there and let's pick up with your episode of the Counselling Tutor Podcast, episode 145.
Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hi, I'm Rory, and at the other side of the studio screen is Ken. How are you doing, Ken?
Exceptionally well. Delighted to be here. Thank you so much for tuning in, for joining us. This is the Counselling Tutor Podcast. You've joined us at episode 145. We're going to be splitting today's episode into 3 different sections, starting off with Rory and I speaking about working with shame, something that is seen a lot in the counselling room. Then we move on to our section called Check-In with CPCAB, where Rory, you spoke with Heather Price and you spoke about external verifier visits. Give us a taste.
Yes, we're going to be pulling the curtain back into the mysteries of being a counselling tutor and how the mechanism of verifying internal portfolios work. And she's going to tell us who the external verifier is, what their role is, and why it's so important for standardizing qualifications to make sure that when someone gets the qualification, employers or anybody who's going to take you on know that it's robust and a solid qualification that they can trust in.
Always valuable information from our good friends at CPCAB. And then we're going to be ending episode 145 by looking at your professional obligations as a qualified therapist and as a therapist in placement, and that is towards GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation. So let's start off and speak about something, I guess, that we see presenting often in counselling, something I can certainly relate to myself, Rory, and that is shame.
Yes, absolutely, and I'll in answer to that, Ken, I'll say, can't we all? I can think of times in my life where I've felt shame, and it's really interesting, and it's a really interesting phenomenon, one that comes up in the therapy room more than we may think, and we need to be aware of it, and we need to be aware of the roots of shame, because shame is always, in my view, generated by external forces. And it really starts off with, parents saying, you should be ashamed of yourself. We've always heard parents say, you should be ashamed of yourself. And it builds this idea in that we self-blame. That's what shame is. We self-blame. And it could come from a number of sources. So cultural conditioning and norms, maybe people who've married outside their faith position, may be shamed by family by saying, you're shaming the family by marrying someone of a different religious persuasion. It could also be online shaming, which is now something that is becoming an epidemic proportion, where people project shame and say horrible things online to people. As a school counsellor, I used to see that all the time with the young people I work with, online shaming, and that can be a variety of things, from posting, cruel comments, to actually posting pictures or commenting on someone's body shape or ethnicity or sexual orientation. The list is endless, and it does really come down to the fact that when people have shame, it's a real burden for them to carry, Ken.
It is indeed. Toxic shame can absolutely crush. And I think it's interesting to kind of just have a look at the roots of shame, because I think you described it very beautifully there, Rory. But what we need to realize is shame is something that every human being kind of has built in, and we have it built in because we have to comply with society. So it's kind of there, and I guess that to keep us on track. So it does have a biological reason for being there. For instance, if you break the law, you may feel ashamed about that and not want to do that again. People don't walk around in society without clothes on because they would feel a sense of shame, and that is called a healthy or an adaptive shame. But it's when shame becomes toxic, when it becomes a self-defeating cycle, when a client is in front of you and they're bringing parts of themselves that really absolutely feel crushed down. And working with shame is, for me, all about unconditional positive regard for the person that is in front of you and for the stuff that they are bringing. Very often when a client wants to bring some material that they believe is shameful to them, they may say, "Oh, I've never told anybody this before." They've kept it hidden away. I don't know how you're going to react when I tell you this. And with them bringing that information, and you as the counsellor just warmly accepting that, showing it in your body language, that you are accepting of what they are bringing and accepting of them as the human being that they are, that can really start laying the groundworks to start working with that shame.
Yeah, absolutely. And I came across a really interesting paper by Dr. Judith Lewis Herman, who delivered a lecture called Shattered Shame States and Their Repair in 2007. And she talks about the code words that clients may use for shame. And these words like ridiculous, foolish, silly, idiotic, stupid, dumb, humiliated, it goes on and on and on. And that is the vocabulary of shame. And, we have to be aware of it, because sometimes it doesn't present itself that clearly in the therapy room. You have to be attuned to the language that a client may use. And also you have to be very, very thoughtful in your responses.
100%. And in working with it, patience and a lot of warmth, I guess. And then we look at shame. It's specifically toxic shame, chronic shame. Its behavior is to hide. The person that is carrying that shame, living with that shame, is living in their own private hell, but they don't feel able to talk to people about it. That is the nature of shame. I'm ashamed. I don't want to tell anybody about this. I will just keep it inside. And it gets darker and darker as they carry that along. It gets heavier and heavier, that burden. And it can be around sexuality. It can be around a sexual act that a person likes and feels ashamed of. It can be, it's seen often with drug and alcohol addiction, where there will be potentially a relapse and then feelings of shame. I'm not worthy. How can I continue to do this? And the interesting thing about shame, it's not only perceived as unacceptable to others, it's perceived as unacceptable to self. You're carrying something inside saying, I cannot accept this that is happening. So if you look to person-centered therapy, we speak about incongruence, where we're showing one thing outside and something different inside, and that is the incongruence or the twist in how that person is feeling. So I think, Rory, those words that you said, great clues to watch out for. I know you've built a super duper handout, which will give you the info in a moment. Check over that to look for clues, and then keep in mind when that shame is presented in the therapy room, quite often it's the first time the person is feeling safe enough to speak about it. You will only potentially see shame presenting in the therapy room when the trust has been built up, when the person feels safe. They feel safe to be able to confide in you. Lots of UPR.
Oh, absolutely, Ken. Here. Lots of UPR, lots of empathy, and lots of unconditional positive regard, good helpings of all of those elements of being a therapist. One area where shame raises its head a lot is clients who present with trauma and abuse. How often have I heard when working with clients, if only I'd have put up a fight, if only I'd have ran away, if only I'd done this and only I'd done that. People carry that for years and years and years. And, it's a pity that it's not a pity we have confidentiality, but I could share some really enlightening stories about when I've fed back to clients that actually this wasn't your fault. And that, the way the brain works, it was protecting you, which is why you didn't fight back. Where people literally sat in front of me, looked like they've had a 4-ton weight lifted off their shoulders. It's so transformational. So we've got to be really attuned to shame and how it attaches to people who've experienced trauma and abuse.
I like what you've just shared there, Rory. You're speaking about psychological education on one hand, and you're also talking about normalizing. So often with the shame, the feeling is, I am the only person ever in the history of humanity to be this way, to have thought that, to have done that, to have been through that situation. So by normalizing, giving information, so helpful to the client. Rory, you've made a super duper handout as you often do, and they are so valuable. It's on the topic of shame, and you can get it for free. You just need to pop over to our website, which is counsellingtutor.com, and right at the top, just click on the menu item for podcasts and go to episode 145. That's today's episode, and you can download Rory's super duper handout on shame from that page. Also on that page, you'll find our show notes. That's what we call them. Basically a description of what we've spoken about today, and any relevant links to additional reading can be found on that page. So great for CPD as well. So that is counsellingtutor.com, podcast tab, episode 145. Go and get that free handout on shame.
Yes, and just go and get it, because it's always going to present in the therapy room. And we're now going to move on to working with our friends at CPCAB, checking with CPCAB. And I caught up with Heather Price, and she talked about the external verifier visit. And you might be thinking, what's an external verifier? We've not learned that in our studies. Well, you probably won't. The external verifier is a representative from the awarding body. So you may be with CPCAB or another awarding body. And the external verifier comes from CPCAB, and has a look at the work that's been produced by students at the end of the academic year and looks at it and effectively third marks it. In other words, they go through it to make sure that it's hit all the criteria from the awarding body perspective. And that's really important because it makes sure that it standardises so that one centre, a centre in Glamorgan and a centre in London, are all working to the same standards. So let's just hear what Heather has to say.
Indeed, let's check in with CPCAB.
Check in with CPCAB.
Hello, and we're with Heather today, and Heather's going to talk about EV visits. So what's an EV, Heather?
Well, an EV stands for external verifier. So that means that it's somebody external to the college or training centre who comes in to check the quality of the standards of delivery and assessment.
Okay, so let's just break those two down for a second. Delivery would be what?
That's the teaching.
Okay.
So it's what the tutors are doing in order to deliver the content and make sure that the groups are running effectively. The standards are as CPCAB would want them to be. And then the assessment to ensure that the tutors are assessing to national standards that CPCAB are setting, if you like, and monitoring. And they do that through looking at some of the assessed work.
Yes, so this is an external eye to make sure that the quality of the courses is consistent throughout.
That's right, throughout the centre and throughout the country. So we have a range of external verifiers, EVs, all around the country, so that it's as close as it can be geographical, so people are not having to travel too far to go into a centre, into a college, to meet people and look at the portfolio work. And they come to us for training twice a year. So we're ensuring that they're all working from the same standards. And so they're then hoping that those standards are going out nationally across the country. So it should be a benchmark.
So it may seem a bit of a strange question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Why is it important that there's a standard across all the centres, across all the country? When we're talking about the country, we're talking primarily England, I think, aren't we? Primarily England, yeah.
Yes, yeah. We do go into other countries, but yeah, primarily England. Well, it's important for the students to know that if, for example, they're doing a level 4 diploma somewhere in London, then that has the same standard as a level 4 diploma in Liverpool or Birmingham or Somerset or Devon or whatever. And it's important for potential employers to know that if they take a student with a CPCAB diploma from Liverpool, say, it's the same standard as one from London or Manchester or anywhere else.
Yes. So we've talked about the fact that the EV comes in, the external verifier, someone external of the college or the training provider, somebody from CPCAB, and we're talking specifically about CPCAB here, but anybody who's doing a vocational qualification, maybe in a training centre, an FE college, most awarding bodies have an external verifier. It would be fair to say. So what is the process? Let's just start with when the EV would come in.
Well, when the EV comes in, they're looking to do 2 or 3 different things. They want to meet a group of students. So if there's more than one group operating in that centre, because the EV does 2 visits in a year, they would see a different group on each visit. And maybe then the next year they'd see a group from a different qualification. So it would be a kind of rolling programme. So they want to meet a group because they want to actually talk to the students concerned who are in that training centre. They want to know from them what it feels like to be a student there. Is the course being run appropriately? Are they getting what they thought they signed up to? Is it all operating okay? Is the tutor there on a regular basis delivering what they need to deliver? Are they understanding the work? Are they learning things? What theory are they learning, for example? So we want to know that firsthand from the students, what their experience is. And so the EV will always meet the group without any tutors being in the room. So the students are free to say what they want to say. Now, usually what they say is going to be reported back, because if a student says, well, I don't want the tutor to know this, the EV would want to know, well, why not? Why do you not have an open enough relationship in the group that you can actually raise this with your tutor? So it might be watered down a bit, but usually it would be fed back to the tutor or to the management. So that's one thing, that the EV wants to meet a group. The EV wants to meet the tutors of that group and any other groups, if the tutors can be there on that day, to get from them their perspective of how the courses are running. And the EV wants to look at a sample of portfolios to check that the work is being assessed appropriately to the right standards.
Yes, so with CPCAB qualifications and indeed other awarding bodies, there's an internal set of work that has to be done, an internal portfolio of work, and then CPCAB assessed by exams. Yes. Others have external work sent away to be marked. So the EV would come in and take a sampling of maybe, I don't know if there's 15 in a group, maybe 7 or 8, 9 or 10, to have a look if the quality of the work is hitting the criteria, the standards, and is matching the specification of the course. Would that be a good summary?
Yeah, that's right. The EV would normally want all the portfolios for each group to be available, which could be a lot in a big centre. And then they would pick and choose the ones they particularly want to look at in more detail. So they'd normally want to look at a good one, a kind of middling or borderline one, and then one perhaps where a student is struggling to meet the standards, to meet the criteria. So they might ask the tutor to pick out a top, middle and bottom, as we say, and then they would dip in and sample other ones depending on what time they've got, because of how many groups there might be.
Yes. So what would happen, if, say, an EV came in and wasn't happy with any aspects of either the teaching or the portfolios that they'd viewed?
Well, they would first of all talk about it with the tutor or tutors, or maybe a member of management. Sometimes the line manager, the coordinator, program lead or whatever is also there, and it's always good for the EV to meet someone like that. So if they can, they would report back to one of those people and certainly report back to the tutor on the day. And then the EV has to write a report. So there's an official written document that goes through CPCAB and then back to the centre. But CPCAB aim not to have anything in that report that hasn't already been discussed and pointed out, so it wouldn't be a surprise to anybody. And it's very much a working relationship. It's not a critical, punitive thing. It's very much just pointing out, well, this could be different, or this might be done more effectively like this, rather than saying, you've got it wrong. We wouldn't do that. So it's how do we work together now to make this more effective? And then on the second visit, which comes later in the year, usually around about May, June time, towards the end of the teaching year, then the EV would be looking to see if the points that had been raised in the earlier visit, which tends to be around about November, December time, if those points had been addressed in the intervening time and how things are.
Yes, so it sounds to me like there's a real quality standard, a living quality standard being addressed to all the centres. And, at no point should anybody who's delivering qualifications not know what's expected of them. Tutors, this is really aimed at. And it's really comforting to the students to know that somebody's overseeing the programme from the people who've written the programme. So yes, that's useful.
Yeah. I think it is helpful for students to know that someone else has got, I think you used the word an eye earlier on, that someone else has got an eye on what's happening. And it's actually quite easy to pick up what's going on through talking to the staff, talking to the students, looking at portfolios. And in fact, somebody asked me recently, because I'm an EV, well, what are you looking for? And how do you know whether it's a good centre or not? And actually, we do know usually quite early on, just by talking to the staff and seeing how they get on with each other, meeting a group and finding out if there's any conflict or lots of complaints, or whether everything's going smoothly. And of course, looking at the portfolios and seeing that they've been regularly assessed and that there's good quality feedback on the work.
Yes, well, I think that is so useful. I think it's one of those hidden functions of counselling courses that sometimes students aren't aware of. They come in and they may hear the term EV, but you've explained it so succinctly. And, the feeling I have is very reassuring to know that somebody external is having oversight of the course provision.
Yes, yeah. And I think that the chances are that sometimes a student might see the EV almost every time they come in if it's a small centre, but actually sometimes they could spend 4 years at a centre and never see the EV if there's lots of different groups running, because the EV might just be going to different groups every time. And so sometimes students do say, well, I've never seen an EV, but they're probably visiting another group.
Yes, they do exist, because we're speaking to an EV now. They're not some kind of mythical entity. One of the things that sometimes students say to us is that the EV comes in and then asks for some work to be rewritten. Is this something that happens? Can an EV look at a portfolio and say, well, yeah, it's okay, but actually we need a bit more?
We wouldn't say that to the students. We would never say that to the students. We might give feedback to a tutor and say, well, you've marked this piece of work against this particular criteria. Actually, maybe it's a little bit thin. We'd probably be looking for a bit more. But we don't have the power to say, rewrite it. That's up to them. And we would never say that to a student.
Okay. Well, again, I think that is reassuring. So, Heather, thank you so much for joining us. You've shed light yet again on an area that I think is something that students may not be aware of, and I've gone away reassured that at least people are doing CPCAB courses, because we're talking to you from CPCAB. There's really, really strong oversight. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Check-in with CPCAB is proudly sponsored by CPCAB, the only awarding body run by counsellors for counsellors. To learn more about CPCAB qualifications and to get more detailed information on today's podcast topic, visit cpcab.co.uk.
Well, there you have it. And in some, as I say, in some cases, it may be that you've handed your internal portfolio in, the external verifier has a look at it and says, well, actually, that bit of the criteria needs to be extended a bit. So it's not unusual to be contacted after you've handed your portfolio in and told it's been passed, for your tutor to contact you and say, actually, the EV's been in and said we need just to put a little bit more information in. And it usually is something like writing, maybe 100 words just to clarify one area that hasn't been covered. And it's a really useful exercise because it gives credibility to the qualification. So when people qualify, employers know that the qualification is robust. If they employ someone from one end of the country or another end of the country, and I'm talking about the UK here, they know that the qualifications are standardised and that they're going to get the same quality candidates in terms of their qualification through the door.
Well, thank you very much for that one. So moving away from study and external verification and portfolios into practice matters. That's a section where we speak about elements of practice that may apply to our qualified practitioner friends out there. And of course, if you're studying as well, this is all stuff that you need to kind of, I guess, start layering in as you make your way towards being in practice. And today we're looking at something really, really important as professional obligation. It's not something you can choose to do or not choose to do. It's not a suggestion. You have to. It is legislation, it is law, and it is GDPR, which is General Data Protection Regulation. It's how you manage, store, distribute and handle any form of electronic data.
Practice matters.
Yes, well, as someone who's literally just this week, at the time of recording, got my own GDPR re-registered with the Information Commissioner's Office, there's a lot of misinformation around about who should register for GDPR and when you have to. And a lot of that information I picked up from our Facebook page. So if you want to join our Facebook page, if you go to Facebook, type in Counselling Tutor. It's a closed group. If you knock on the door, of course, we're going to let you in. And in that group, there's thousands of people like-minded, like yourselves. Some are students, a lot are qualified colleagues. There's some supervisors. There's a smattering, a soupçon of tutors in there. And some of the conversations generate occasionally around GDPR, and there's just so much information. So a lot of people think that you don't have to register with the Information Commissioner's Office as a data holder if you only have the client's phone number. No, if you have any client's information, it doesn't matter what it is, a phone number, an address, you have to register with the Information Commissioner's Office. It's not a debate. It's not be nice. It would be nice if you did. It's the law. You have to do it. And, in terms of qualified colleagues, even if you've got paper information, I read this week, you don't need to register for with the Information Commissioner's Office if you have everything on paper. That's not true either. It used to be the case many years ago in 1999, but now if you have any information that the client could identify themselves with, you have to store it. You have to store it safely. You have to make sure it's secure. You have to tell the client that they can access their data. So clients under the law can access their notes, can access any information that you have on them. It may be a referral that you've written. So you really, really do need to become aware, if you've not already done it, of what the ICO does, and you register with them if you're carrying any data whatsoever.
Yeah, so I guess generally GDPR does cover electronic data, but you're 100% right, Rory, that we need to look at paper documents as well. When I was doing my research for today's episode, I really looked into this paper records, and I got the view of the BACP. So the question being, I only keep paper records. Do I need to register with the ICO? And this is the answer from the BACP on the website on today's date, which is the 29th of February 2020, because of course that can change. And it says if you don't process any personal information electronically, so this means, and this is important here, no emails, no texts, no contact details on your phone, no audio recordings, then you don't have to register with ICO, but you still do have to comply with GDPR. And that's what Rory is saying. GDPR, although it is linked to ICO here in the UK, you would go to their website, which is ico.org.uk. And again, we will pop that link into the show notes. You can get all the information there, and you can actually do a self-test where they will ask you some questions and you can kind of fill them in, and it will tell you whether you need to register with them or not. But whether you register or not with the ICO, whether you need to register or not, you still have to comply with GDPR. And I think you're right, Rory, there was a myth in thinking that, I keep everything in documentation, GDPR does not apply to me. Oh, yes, it does. And that came into effect on the 25th of May, 2018. From that date onwards to where we are today, when you're listening to this is applicable.
Yes, and it came into law in May 2018. But actually, the idea of it and the positioning of it was developed in 2016. So people really should have been complying under GDPR
from 2016. It was a mandatory law that came in 2018. And my view on GDPR is, if you're working with a client and you store any information, it's different if you're working for an agency, because if you're storing information at your agency, the agency needs to comply with GDPR. But if you're a private practitioner and you have any information where the client could be identified, you really have to register. Unless you contact your client by telepathy, you will be carrying their data. It's really, really important, and the fines for non-compliance can be eye-watering, as well as being. And we started off with shamed with by if you're caught and you're prosecuted not complying with GDPR, they put you on the website. So go to our webpage at counsellingtutor.com. It's the podcast webpage. It's episode 145, and there's a link in the show notes which will give you a self certification. You can go along and you can test whether you need to register or not. It's very, very good.
Yeah, and very useful as well. Very useful to do. I remember doing it for my own practice and being quite surprised when GDPR had just come out. I thought, I've only got a handful of clients. It's not going to apply to me. It applied to me. Pays your money. And what it also does, it gives you protection. It gives you policies and procedures that you can follow to kind of show that you are compliant to GDPR. And as you mentioned, Rory, those fines are eye-watering. And you only have to look in the news and you'll see that some of the big tech companies are being hit with these massive fines. And they're in the millions, those fines. They really are. Eye-watering is being very kind, I think, there. So another question that comes up a lot with GDPR is how long should I keep records for? So you would need to look to your ethical body for how long you should keep a client's notes for, because it may differ where you are. But when it comes to GDPR, this is separate. It's not about your notes. It's about the legislation of the land. All companies have to comply to this. And there is no set time limit on how long you are required to keep the information. However, as soon as that information that you are keeping electronically is no longer relevant and you no longer have a need to keep it, then that data has to be deleted. So, for example, if you were required to keep your notes by your ethical body for, let's say, 5 years, then you have a legitimate reason for keeping that information. But as soon as that time period goes by, if you're not in contact with that client anymore, you have no more dealings with them, you are obligated to delete those files. And they have to be deleted in a way that they are not retrievable. And sadly, this is a whole podcast episode on its own, isn't it, Rory? Because if you go, oh, I don't need these anymore, and you pop them into your trash, and then you think, you know what, I'm going to be doubly sure here. I'm even going to delete my trash can so that it can't be retrieved. Oh, yes, they can. They're not gone. They have not been deleted. Rory, you can maybe give us a little bit more about this process.
Yes, well, you know, unless you're using specific software, there's specific software. The government use specific software that wipe out your hard drive. In government departments, say for instance you work for the Secret Services, they've got special software that completely deletes everything on the hard drive, and you can get access to software like that. I take the hard drive out of my computer when it's no longer useful. And I was up in the loft the other day, and I've got about 3 or 4 stacked up, and I just put them in the loft. Maybe I should wear a tinfoil hat. Perhaps, but whistle the X-Files tune. But yeah, I take data protection really, really, really seriously. And one final observation on that is if you have insurance, and if you're a private practitioner, you should have insurance. I feel like I'm preaching to people here, but you should have insurance if you're a private practitioner. Your insurance company will also tell you how long they request you to keep information, and that should be in your contract. So yes, GDPR is a whole podcast, but I have done a lecture on GDPR, and that's available for members of the Counselling Study resource.
Yeah, and I'm happy to say that lecture that you did on GDPR has also been added to our resource for qualified practitioners called Counsellor CPD. You can get more information about that lecture and a whole host of lectures, CPD lectures and lectures for students to help with your studies, and you can get that at counsellingtutor.com. Just before we leave GDPR, probably the most important part of GDPR is something called your privacy statement. It's where you state, you write out, and you have recorded in text so that it can be looked at by your clients or anybody that chooses to do business with you, how you handle data, what your privacy statement is. It needs to be thorough. It needs to include any additional services you use. So if you're using an email provider that is external to your website, it needs to be mentioned. So you might say, my emails go through, I'm just using an example here, there are many different mail servers available, but it may be Gmail. And then you need to look to Gmail and how they protect data. And you need to kind of show that you've looked over your whole system of everywhere that you collect and use data, and show how you are protecting that data for your clients. And that's what we're doing, really. We're looking out for our clients. We're making sure that their data doesn't fall into the wrong hands, that it is not hacked, that it is not used to potentially harm them, as data has been harvested and used for before, sadly. So this is a good thing. And I think it's something that we all have to do. And then there are additional considerations with GDPR when working with children and young people. We don't have time in this podcast to go into it. It is an incredibly complex topic. I recommend going and look at Rory's lecture on that. Counsellingtutor.com is where you get the information for that. Or if need be, look around online. There are some experts there that can help you get your practice set up or your agency set up. What an episode, Rory. Episode 145 started off working with shame. Then we checked in with Heather Price at CPCAB, speaking about external verification visits. And then, of course, the complex topic of GDPR under our professional obligations here in Practice Matters.
Absolutely. And as always, stay grounded, stay safe, and try to avoid wearing the tinfoil hats.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.